I mean, I'm not picking the United States out particularly, except that it's so powerful and spends so much money on its military and wants to rule the world in like a old kind of imperial power.
Right.
They want to be the Roman Empire,
Right.
and to some large extent they're succeeding. But a consequence of their success is they are destroying everything, destroying this planet, destroying all of this. And I'm not saying that because this is just picturesque and beautiful, but because it's the same, everywhere.
Wow.
My missus yesterday was she keeps carnivorous plants. They're down there by this pool. And yesterday there was a praying mantis about that big sitting on one of them. And we sat and transfixed and watched the incredible beauty of a hornet thinking about going into one of them to its death. And then the praying mantis actually saw it. And then so it was like watching David Attenborough, but it was like it's in the back garden. I mean, all of this is so exquisitely beautiful that to rush headlong into just killing everything, it seems to be hugely counterproductive. But sadly, IQ in species doesn't seem to be a qualifying factor that helps species to survive. I mean, Homo sapiens we have a lot of intelligence, but we don't seem to be able to connect it to our capacity for love and empathy in order to say, hang on a minute, this is where we live. This is as far as we know, this is all we've got. No, we're not going to, whatever Elon Musk may say, we're not going to go and colonize Mars. And why would we want to? We can figure out how to live here. But we do have to act collectively, and we have to act out of compassion for one another and accept we're all brothers and sisters and blah, blah, blah. We can't make it a neoliberal, Keynesian economic free-for-all where the weakest get trampled on or killed. And the strongest get richer and richer and richer until they don't know which Gulf Stream to get into that morning to fly to breakfast or whatever it is that they're doing. I know you know all this, but most of the people who live here in the United States, they have no idea. They have no idea.
Well, if I could just share a couple of things. I interviewed a sheriff, very cool. His name's Tony Estrada, and he was born in Nogales, Mexico, but he's a fantastic sheriff, and I got attracted to watching him on documentaries because he was so humane. And one of the things that he said that just resonated with me, he said the United States creates the drug cartels. He said the United States took their eye off of Mexico. I interviewed a guy that started some of those militia on the border, Jim Gilchrist, and I went to his house. Jim was with me not too long ago, and he was talking about this kind of European white identity. And I said, I don't think that it exists, what you're referring to. And I said, do you know that the United States had a coup in 1954 in Guatemala and overthrew a democratically elected government in El Salvador and Honduras and and all this? And he said, John, he says, I didn't know that. So this is like this kind of...
This is your sheriff.
Yeah, well, he was. This was Jim Gilchrist. He was the guy that was part of the border militia. But what I was telling him, is, and he kind of just came clean. He was very sad. He said, John, I didn't really know that. He says, you look at all the shit that the United States creates that Americans don't know about. So he says, there's a demographic crisis where people are coming from Central America. Do you know why they're coming from Central America?
Because the United States imposed dictatorships on them.
Exactly. And then, the same thing in other places where there's a fight over the narrative. I mean, the sheriff, Tony Estrada, says, we took our eye off a very friendly neighbor in Mexico, and we spent all our time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we just weren't paying attention. But I think the point is when people are ignorant and all they do is they talk about all these refugees or these migrants coming with very little understanding how the United States was involved in bringing this about. And it's a contest for the narrative. which I think leads me also to, I think the narrative on Israel that just drives me insane. It's very difficult to teach Israel and Palestine without worrying the same thing, that someone labels you an anti-Semite. But these questions that you hear like from Mark Regev, does Israel not have the right to defend itself? And without any other investigation, people say, oh, wow, that seems very, very logical. Or, in 2005, that Israel left Gaza? I said, okay, fair enough. Who controls the water? Who controls the air? Who controls the fish? There's a guy by the name of Dov Weissglass who controlled the calories of the people that are actually living in Gaza. I asked Chomsky about this, and he said, is this, I've heard this, and he confirmed it. And so with people very superficial and not really doing their work, said, well, Jesus, I don't know, it sounds fair enough. Israel got up and they left Gaza. And that they're left, when people come up with, in my opinion, wonderful conclusions, good conclusions, to the false information that they have. It seems quite logical. And there's a constant, fighting for this. I wanted to ask you, because I know that you have another engagement, but just try to bring this together. When you went to the West Bank, I remember you saying, looking at the plight of the Palestinian people, it brought tears to your eyes. And I think one of the things that is like a segue, I don't understand, why is it about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that it's almost like evidence? You bring evidence to people and they'll still come up with some other creative reason to say, it's not an occupation, or Israeli soldiers are the most humane in the world. What did you find? What was your experience when you went to the West Bank?
All right, so this is 2006 we're talking about, or 2007, when I went all over with Allegra Pachea, and under the protection of the UN, which immediately made us sort of suspect. So it may be the cruel, callous disdain with which I was treated by all those young Israeli kids who man all the border posts and the checkpoints and the things. And I remember thinking at the time, my God, if they're treating me like this, an English national, foreigner, checking stuff out, imagine how they are treating the people they're occupying and who are a subjugated second class, or they're treated as if they are not human. The Palestinians are treated like animals. And even some of the politicians, I mean, if you listen to Eilert Shakar or any of them actually, sometimes, it slips out all the time that's how they think of them. So it's an experiment that went hideously and horribly wrong. Obviously, during and after the First World War, and Sykes-Picot and the divvying up of all the stuff in the Middle East was insane after the First World War. That was a real opportunity then to say, let's have a look at this thing. And we now have some power because we've just fought a war against the Turks and the Germans, and we seem to have won it. So let's figure out how to. And they didn't. They went, let's divvy up this cake and fucking eat it. And that's what the Brits did after the First World War. And people are always talking about the Balfour Declaration, which actually was just one letter to Edmund Rothschild saying this government looks favourably beyond the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine.
But they didn't want Jews in England.
And yeah, clearly, but the sentence that follows that is, so long as it in no way impacts on the civil or human rights of the indigenous people of that land, the people who are living there, so long as it doesn't impact in any way on their freedoms. And that's a bit of the Balfour letter that is rarely read out in public because it's an inconvenient truth for the Israeli government. And so there's this. What's interesting is that this is only 70 years old. It's not like talking about the colonization of North America and the genocide of the Native American people who were living here, and South America, North and South America, by the English and the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French and whoever else wanted a piece of it. But this is happening now. So this is settler colonialism, rampant, based upon religious and white supremacist ideas of how human beings differ one from another. So and so they've created this apartheid state, which people now recognise that's what it is. Richard Falk and others have written extensively on this thing, and so we know what the reality is, but I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to predict what may happen in the future. But I do know this: the movement of which I'm a small part, the BDS movement, is growing hand over fist, which is why they're becoming more and more desperate in their attempts to criminalize it.
Well, they tried to shut down a conference with Sut Jolly, right? You were part of, and there was perhaps a lawsuit taking place. And
well, that was at Amherst. That was at
Yes.
UMass Amherst. Yeah, but that never really got off the ground. It went before a local judge who just went, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, I remember you saying you wished it had gone it'd gone a bit further. It might have been more beneficial.
Well, I wish that when Cuomo wrote by executive order, he wrote into the New York state legislature that no state organization could do business with anyone who had anything to do with BDS. And in consequence, they tried to stop me playing in the Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I was praying that they would push that, so I could have my day in court and argue the case for freedom of speech and the First Amendment and all the rest of it.